I come to the floor today to make brief comments on two other subjects, Mr. President. The first is about a subject that's concerning about 75 million American families. That is going back to college, going back to school. The question is on the minds of many Americans. Will we be going back to college? Will our children be going back to school? And we finished a hearing today. The presiding officer was present. The senator from Alaska was present. A hearing on going back to college safely. The question is not whether we're going back to college in the United States of America. The question is how to go back safely. And we heard, because we all understand that when 75 million students go back to college and go back to school, that is the surest sign that American life is regaining its rhythm. Not just for the students themselves, but especially with the children, for their parents, most of whom work outside the home. But today's subject was about college. And we had excellent witnesses. We had the president of Purdue University. He was introduced by the senator from Indiana, Mitch Daniels. We had the president of Brown University, Christina Paxson. We had Logan Hampton, who was president of a small, historically black college in Jackson, Tennessee, Lane College. And we had the president of the American Public Health Association, Dr. Benjamin. And they talked with us about the various strategies and concerns that existed. I will, in a few minutes, ask consent to put my opening statement in the record, but if I could summarize it, it would be this. Most of our 6,000 public colleges and universities, some public, some private, some church schools, will be open in August for in-person students. Not all of them. University of California State System has said so far that it expects only to offer online courses. But at Purdue, for example, an institution of 55,000 students, President Daniels has decided, with approval of his board, and President Paxson at Brown, a different kind of institution in the Northeast, different than Purdue, they both decided that it's their obligation to open up and to create a safe environment for the students to come back. There are several reasons for this. There is some health risk of coming back, and of course, wise leadership can address that. But I think as all of us have looked at our colleges, wise leadership can make colleges among the safest communities to live and work in America over the next year. Because colleges have certain advantages. First place, most of the campus community is young. And while we can't be cavalier about the effect of COVID-19 on young people, as Dr. Fauci has warned us, fact of the matter is that COVID-19 seems to hurt the young much less. A second reason why it'll be easier to go back to college is because there's a lot of space in colleges that isn't used. Colleges are the most notorious wasters of space in our society. It's rare that a class is taught in the early morning or late evening or on Saturdays or in the summers. There's plenty of time and plenty of space to spread out on most college campuses. And as we learn more and more about COVID-19, it looks like there are three things we really need to do. Keep 6 feet apart, wash our hands, and wear a mask. Do those three things, and we could probably go back to school, back to work, and out to eat, and do most of the things that we would like to do. Well, at a college, as President Daniels said, he intends to develop a culture of masks. Vanderbilt University is going to require masks to be worn in all indoor situations. And then they're taking a number of other steps. Concerts and parties and large gatherings are out. Flu shots and grab-and-go meals are in. There will be systematic testing, and testing will be done in different ways. The president of Brown would like to test every student, she said in an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago. The president of Purdue said, well, maybe systematic testing. There'll be different strategies for testing, but the goal of testing is two things. One is containing the disease, that is identifying the sick and the exposed so they can be quarantined, so the rest of us don't have to be. And the other is to build confidence. I know that when I took a test last week after I was exposed to COVID-19, I went home for 2 weeks of self-isolation, as the attending physician said I should do. That should have been it, but I went to my local public health department and took a test which turned out to be negative for peace of mind. It gave me more confidence to go back home and be with my family. So the anticipation is that there'll be plenty of testing. And Admiral Giroir, the Assistant Secretary of Public Health, has told our committee that we're in the United States doing about 10 million tests a month now, that states are submitting to the federal government a plan each month about their testing needs. The federal government is helping fill in any gaps, and that over the next 2 or 3 months, the number of tests will go from about 10 million a month to 40 or 50 million tests a month. That's a lot of tests. We're already testing more than any country in the world. So my guess is that colleges and universities, even though there's 6,000 of them, 127 different institutions in Tennessee, if they'll be in touch with their governor and be a part of the state testing plan, that they can have adequate tests not only to contain the disease and isolate those who should be isolated, but to give peace of mind to other students and faculty and members of the community who come on board. Finally, we talked a little bit about the role of the federal government. We have a classic discussion about that here. Some want to say Washington should do it. Some want to say the states should do it. Generally, our friends on the Democratic side trust Washington, D.C. Generally, we on the Republican side trust the states. But there's a role for both. I mean, the federal government, through the Centers for Disease Control, can provide advice. The federal government, as it's doing through the Shark Tank, as we call it at the National Institutes of Health, can accelerate the number of rapid tests that are available at a low cost for campuses. The federal government can provide additional funding for campuses, as we did in the CARES Act. Those are some of the things that we can do from here. But the things we ought not to try to do from here are to order California to open its campuses if California doesn't want to, or to tell Purdue and Notre Dame and Brown and the University of Tennessee and Vanderbilt that they cannot open their campuses if they do want to and think they can do it safely. We should not be trying to tell each of those campuses exactly how many tests they have, what kind of tests they have, any more than we try to tell them what the faculty ought to be paid, or what student admissions policies ought to be, or what the curriculum ought to be. So while the federal government needs to create an umbrella in which individual campuses can go back to school safely, we need to be careful about telling everybody exactly what to do. We had a very big event here 4 or 5 years ago when we fixed No Child Left Behind. Everybody wanted it fixed. Democrats, Republicans, labor unions, governors, teachers. Why? Because after a while, everybody got tired of Washington, D.C. telling 100,000 public schools exactly what to do, what teachers to hire, what curriculum to have, all of these things. The same is true with our colleges. Our system of colleges and universities is the best in the world. Everyone concedes that. It's not gotten there by Washington ordering what it should do. And Washington shouldn't order what it should do about this disease. It should advise, it should help, it could help send money, but the autonomy of each campus ought to be respected. And one other thing about that the colleges and universities have asked for from us is liability protection. I would like to ask consent to include, following my remarks, a letter from the American Council on Education with a number of things in it that they ask of Congress. This is the umbrella organization for higher education, and it includes liability protection. Next week in our committee, we will take a look at going back to school safely, K through 12. That's a lot more families. 20 million college students, 75 million children in K through 12. And in every one of those families, in every one of those homes, I can tell you those families are worried about whether those children can go back to school and whether they can go safely. I believe they can be, and all across the country,